Welcome to Dolphin Dive Daily, your go-to spot for everything Miami Dolphins. If you bleed aqua and orange, hit that subscribe button and join the pod. The Miami Dolphins are at a critical crossroads when it comes to their cornerback situation, and the name that keeps surfacing is Rasul Douglas. Reports have indicated the Dolphins remain in active discussions with the veteran free agent, signaling a real interest in adding some experience to a secondary that's been anything but stable. At 29 years old and coming off a season with the Buffalo Bills where he made 15 starts, Douglas remains a high-profile option, while the numbers from last season weren't eye-popping. The veteran corner still boasts enough physical tools and NFL savvy to make an immediate impact. It's important to realize that Douglas doesn't have to be an all-pro for the Dolphins to benefit. He just needs to bring stability and competence. With TYREEK the only cornerback on the roster who can be called a consistent starter, Miami has little margin for error. Adding Douglas wouldn't be a luxury, it might be a necessity. Looking strictly at his performance from 2024, the evaluation of Rasul Douglas becomes more complex. On the surface, his 43 total tackles, 5 passes defended, and 1 forced fumble show a player who was active and involved. But those numbers don't paint the whole picture. Despite his reputation as a ball hawk, Douglas didn't snag a single interception last season, something that hasn't happened to him since 2020. Even more concerning was the career-high 116.9 passer rating he allowed when targeted, coupled with 10 penalties, another personal worst. These stats don't exist in a vacuum. They reflect the reality that Douglas struggled in coverage, and at times became a liability. While context matters and there were mitigating factors like Buffalo's poor safety play, those numbers are hard to ignore. The question isn't whether Douglas is declining, it's how far along that decline might already be. One thing that cannot be overlooked is how Douglas fits into the Dolphins' defensive system. Under new defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver, the Dolphins are expected to run a predominantly zone-based scheme that plays directly into Douglas' strengths. He's never been known for his man-to-man ability, even during his peak years, but his instincts and understanding of space and zone coverage have often allowed him to excel. When Douglas is playing his best football, he baits quarterbacks into poor throws and uses his long frame to disrupt passing lanes. That's not something easily coached, and it's a skill set Miami desperately needs. The idea of Douglas thriving in a system that plays to his strengths makes the signing more attractive, even if last year's struggles show he might have lost a step. Still, the fit between player and scheme makes this more than just a desperation move, of course. Any veteran signing brings with it a certain amount of risk, especially at cornerback, a position that punishes aging more than most players in. The secondary need elite footwork, anticipation, and closing speed. When those attributes decline, they usually do so rapidly and noticeably. Douglas didn't just have a down year, he had the kind of season that makes front offices nervous. The Bills clearly felt that way, choosing to spend a first-round pick on Maxwell Hairston. A move that screams replacement. It's telling that Buffalo, a team familiar with Douglas' skill set and character, didn't make a serious effort to retain him. That should give Miami pause. Signing Douglas might not just be about adding a veteran, it could be about betting on a player who's already on the wrong side of his peak. But perhaps Douglas was more a victim of circumstance than a player in decline. In Buffalo, he often found himself in difficult matchups with limited support from a depleted safety unit. It's not hard to imagine that in a more stable environment, like what Miami could offer with Minkah Fitzpatrick roaming the deep third, Douglas might bounce back. Additionally, being targeted more frequently because Christian Benford emerged as a shutdown corner isn't necessarily an indictment. It's a byproduct of opposing quarterbacks going after the perceived weaker link. That kind of targeting skews stats and can make even solid performances look worse on paper. With the Dolphins, Douglas might benefit from being surrounded by better back-end talent and from facing fewer targets if teams opt to go after Miami's less experienced corners instead. Speaking of experience, one of the main reasons Douglas makes sense for the Dolphins is the sheer lack of proven depth at the cornerback position. Outside of TYREEK, Miami's secondary is a blend of youth and failed reclamation projects. In that context, Douglas' resume becomes extremely valuable. He doesn't need to be a Pro Bowler, he just needs to be steady, consistent, and assignment sound. And compared to the likes of Storm Duck, who's still unproven at the NFL level, Douglas brings a level of professionalism and football IQ that can help elevate the entire unit. But therein lies the dilemma. Do you invest reps in a declining veteran for immediate stability, Or do you give those snaps to a young player who might grow into something more? That's the balance Miami has to weigh carefully. There's also a philosophical layer to consider. After last season's disappointment, this should be a win-now year for the Dolphins. The front office and coaching staff are under pressure to deliver results, and bringing in a seasoned cornerback like Douglas would suggest they're aware of that. But the team's off-season actions haven't exactly matched that urgency. They passed on multiple chances in free agency and the draft to shore up the secondary with high-end talent. If Douglas is the best option remaining, that says more about missed opportunities than anything else. Still, it's not too late to make a course correction, and signing Douglas would at least acknowledge the need for more competence on the outside. He may not be the long-term answer, but he could be the stopgap they need right now. It's important not to overstate what Douglas brings. He's not a savior. If he plays like he did last year, he might only be marginally better than what Miami already has. But even marginal improvements matter when the alternatives are raw or unreliable. For example, Storm Duck allowed a 100-point-to-passer rating in 2024, which isn't great but is still better than Douglas' numbers. And while tape tells a more optimistic story for Douglas, the overall trend line isn't encouraging. He looks slower, less reactive, and less able to recover when beaten. The big question the Dolphins must answer is whether that decline continues, or if a change of scenery and scheme can help him rebound. Betting on a bounce back isn't foolish, but it's not a guaranteed solution either ultimately. Adding Rasul Douglas would be a smart move, but it needs to be viewed through the right lens. He's not the future, and he's probably not a long-term starter, but what he could be is a stabilizing force for a defense in flux. A player who brings experience, structure, and a level of predictability to a unit sorely lacking in all three. If the Dolphins are honest with themselves about what Douglas is and what he isn't, they can make the most of what he offers. Signing him doesn't solve all their problems in the secondary, but it does buy them time for young players to develop, time to reassess long-term strategies, and most importantly, time to compete now without completely punting on the future. That's a trade-off worth making. In conclusion, the Dolphins face a choice that goes beyond just one player. Signing Rasul Douglas isn't about making a splash, it's about addressing a weakness. With a practical, short-term solution, he won't fix everything, and if his 2020 form carries over, he might not even be a huge upgrade. But the Dolphins don't have the luxury of waiting for perfect options. They need reliable play at cornerback, and Douglas, for all his flaws, might be the best bet left on the board. Just don't expect him to be what he was 2 or 3 years ago. Expect competence. Expect professionalism, and maybe, just maybe, expect a little redemption. For both the player and a franchise that desperately needs to prove it's still on the rise. If Miami can get that much out of this move, it will be worth every bit of the investment. Still with us? Then show some love. Hit that like button and let us know in the comments, what's your take on the Fins this week? Tyreek Hill has set the NFL world ablaze with a statement that no one saw coming. The Miami Dolphins star wide receiver, known for his blazing speed and electric plays, hinted at a potential departure from the team in a way that caught fans, analysts, and even some teammates completely off guard. In a recent off-the-cuff remark during a podcast appearance, Hill mentioned he's been thinking about life beyond Miami, sparking an avalanche of speculation. Though he didn't go into specifics, the tone and timing of his comment couldn't have been more cryptic or more impactful. This wasn't the calculated media speak fans are used to hearing from athletes. This was raw, unrehearsed, and above all, real. Hill's words felt like a window into a thought process that might have already taken root. Is this a moment of reflection, a strategic move, or the beginning of a dramatic exit? The NFL world wants answers. To fully understand the ripple effect of Tyreek Hill's comments, we have to rewind a bit. Since joining the Miami Dolphins in 2022, Hill has been nothing short of sensational. He's shattered franchise records, turned Tua Tagovailoa into a top-tier quarterback, and given Dolphins fans hope for their first real Super Bowl run in decades. His presence on the field is undeniable, but it's his off-field charisma that has made him a beloved figure in South Florida. So when someone like Tyreek, a player at the peak of his powers, with years left in the tank, casually suggests he might walk away, it's more than a fleeting thought. It feels like a thunderclap, a disruption to the carefully built narrative of a Dolphins team poised for greatness. Is he unhappy with his role? Is there a deeper issue with the coaching staff, or perhaps something personal pulling him away from football? There's also the looming factor of legacy. TYREEK Hill has always talked about retiring young, even before he signed that monster contract with Miami. He hinted he might hang it up earlier than most elite receivers do. That dream of walking away while still at the top could be resurfacing, especially now that he's checked several career milestones off his list. With multiple Pro Bowl appearances, a Super Bowl ring, and statistical dominance under his belt, Hill might be reevaluating what truly matters to him. Football is a brutal game, and Hill has never shied away from admitting he wants to avoid the long-term physical toll. Still, there's a difference between planning a graceful exit years down the road and planting the seeds of departure right in the middle of what's supposed to be a championship window. That's where the confusion and concern starts to mount. Sources close to the Dolphins organization say there have been no formal discussions about Hill's future, at least none that have made their way to the front office. But those same sources also acknowledge that TYREEK is his own man, often keeping thoughts and plans close to the chest. What adds to the intrigue is how confident and calm Hill sounded when talking about his potential exit. This wasn't a frustrated player venting after a tough loss or lashing out at the media. It was almost serene, like he had already made peace with a decision that hasn't yet been communicated publicly. That's what makes this so chilling for Dolphins fans. If he's already emotionally checked out or mentally preparing for the next chapter, then the franchise could be on the brink of losing its most explosive player without any warning. That's a nightmare scenario for any front office. What's even more fascinating is the timing of these comments. The Dolphins are entering a critical stretch, with expectations sky high and playoff aspiration more real than ever. Head coach Mike McDaniel has built a team centered around speed, precision, and cohesion, qualities that TYREEK Hill exemplifies. Losing him now, or even knowing he's thinking about leaving, could shake the very foundation of what this team is trying to accomplish. Opposing teams are surely paying attention. Agents, G-Miz, and insiders around the league are already whispering, wondering if there's a backdoor opportunity to lure Hill away. Could a team like the Chiefs try to rekindle the flame? Or maybe a West Coast franchise closer to Hill's personal interests? There's no shortage of speculation, and the market would be volcanic if he ever truly became available. Social media, of course, exploded the moment Hill's comments hit the airwaves. Fans posted clips of the interview, dissected every pause and inflection, and argued endlessly about what it all really meant. Some believe it's nothing more than off-season musings, a star player being candid in a casual setting. Others think it's the first domino in a calculated campaign to leave the Dolphins on his own terms. What can't be denied is the emotional reaction from fans. For a team that has finally found its rhythm, the idea of losing its brightest star mid-journey is devastating. Dolphins Twitter is in meltdown mode, and every update, tweet, or rumor involving TYREEK is treated like breaking news. It's chaos, wrapped in uncertainty, and nobody seems to have a clear read on where this goes next. TYREEK Hill's history adds even more complexity to the situation. This is a player who has always done things his way, often zigging when others zag. From his exit in Kansas City to his explosive arrival in Miami, Hill has shown he's not afraid to make bold moves if he believes they're best for him and his family. He's also a savvy businessman with interests outside of football that include esports, podcasting, and fitness ventures. Is it possible that this comment was a strategic play to build leverage for future negotiations? Or maybe a subtle way to increase his brand value by keeping his name in headlines? Hill's been in the spotlight long enough to know how narratives are shaped, and it's not out of the question that this is a move straight out of the superstar playbook. Behind the scenes, the Dolphins front office is undoubtedly taking this seriously, even if TYREEK's comments were made in passing. The very idea that he's entertaining life beyond football or beyond Miami requires attention. They can't afford to be caught flat-footed if this snowballs into a real issue. Expect quiet meetings, closed-door conversations, and possibly even outreach from ownership. After all, you don't let a player of Hill's caliber walk without exhausting every effort to understand and resolve the situation. Whether that means reshuffling contracts, reaffirming his role, or simply offering reassurances, the Dolphins have work to do. The clock may not be ticking loudly just yet, but it's definitely ticking, and if this is more than just talk, the organization needs to prepare for the storm that could be coming. What makes this entire saga so unpredictable is that TYREEK Hill holds all the cards. He's financially secure, professionally accomplished, and beloved by fans across the league. If he wants to stay, the Dolphins will roll out the red carpet. If he wants to leave, there's little they can do to stop him beyond persuasion. That kind of leverage is rare, and Hill knows it. It's why every word he says carries extra weight. And every pause feels like a cliffhanger. As things stand now, we're all stuck in limbo waiting, wondering, analyzing. The Dolphins season hasn't even started yet, but the drama already feels like mid-season frenzy. Will Hill double down and walk back his comments, or will he lean into the idea of change, sparking a blockbuster saga, the likes of which we haven't seen since Brady's departure from New England? In the end, this could all amount to nothing, a fleeting moment of introspection that got blown out of proportion by a sports media machine starved for headlines. But with someone like TYREEK Hill, it's never just noise. There's always a deeper layer, a motive, a strategy. Whether this is the beginning of the end for Hill in Miami or just a bump in the road remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, the NFL world will be watching his every move from now on. His next tweet, his next press conference, even his body language on the sidelines will be scrutinized like never before. Because when a superstar speaks, even casually, the world listens, and right now, TYREEK Hill has everyone's full attention. That's a wrap for today's dive. If you're loving the content, share it with a fellow Dolphins fan. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a splash. Fins up.